As the new year approaches, you're probably thinking, all right, this is the year I get my life together. This is the year things start to fall into place. But if you're like I was, you're talking to the same people, you're having the same conversations, and that next level is just somewhere where you can't find it. It feels like there's no one that can give you new insight, the next best step, a direction to go into to change your life the way that you want it to. I was in those shoes a few years ago. I felt super stuck. I didn't know anyone who worked the jobs that I wanted to work. My friends were doctors, they were getting their PhD, they were in boot camps, and I really wanted to break into tech. I was working at a company that nobody had heard of. It was a small company. I really didn't want to work there. I didn't like there. I had bigger, loftier dreams for myself, but I just didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't know who might be able to give me direction to be able to achieve those dreams for myself. I was really early on in my career. I didn't know a lot of people. My network was really small. It was just a bunch of people my age, which felt like a hindrance because no one was really in a position where their advice was too different than the advice that I had already heard from my peers and my friends. I was looking for someone who, broke into tech already, someone who was working the job that I wanted to work. All I really had was, YouTube day in the life videos, and that wasn't really helping because I had no idea how they got there. I really didn't know where to turn to. I felt frustrated and I felt stuck. But here's what I did. I didn't know that this was a form of mentorship, and I didn't approach it like that. However, I started reading books. Reading wasn't something I did a lot in my free time at this point. It wasn't a great hobby of mine, but I started reading biographies and autobiographies. I decided that, hey, if I can't learn from the people around me, maybe I can learn from the people who have had past successes. It's not necessarily people who, for me, worked in tech, but it was people who had built up resilience, built up grit, determination, then showed the story that way. I'm sure you're thinking, all right, I don't have to read a book. I can go on YouTube and find a summary of the book. I can look up a summary in any other way. I can ask AI to summarize it for me. But the salient parts of the book isn't going to be in somebody else's distillation of the book. You have your own life journey. You have your own history. You have your own way of understanding information. So why would you want somebody else's distillation to then cloud that judgment that you could have of that book? And I mean judgment in a good way. You could read the book and there's a quote in there that nobody's talking about. You've searched up dozens, a tremendous amount of summaries on this book. You've heard so many people talk about it, but nobody's mentioned this one quote to you. And that's the quote that changes something for you. That's the quote that flips a switch in your head where you say, like, you know what, I'm actually capable of doing this thing. I can apply this to my life. Your life is so personal to you. Don't rely on somebody else's understanding of a book that you want to read. Go and read the book instead of looking up a summary, because it's going to make a really big difference in how you interpret the content. And the reason that I say autobiographies or biographies is because it kind of gives you an unfiltered understanding of somebody's life. It gives you the struggles, it gives you the failures, it gives you the successes. Even though the journey might not be exactly what you're going through, there's going to be parts of that speak to you. There's going to be parts of their journey that you say, okay, well, all the odds are stacked against him, and it feels like all the odds are stacked against me. Here's how this person overcame that hurdle, and maybe I can apply that and overcome the hurdle myself. The first book that I read that changed the game for me, and this might have been the first book I read for fun in a really long time. It was a book called On Fire. I found it in the free library at work. I was bored one day, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try reading more. And this is the book I picked up. I still have the book. It's notated. It's got the Post-its throughout the whole thing. This man had 100% of his body burned. He had to learn to live again. He had to learn to walk again. All the things that we take for granted. And so I was reading this book and saying, okay, none of these things are stopping me, thankfully. I don't have a life-altering life event to then come up from. I have my abilities with me. Why am I getting in my own way? And that's kind of where I switched. And at this point in my life, I was an intern somewhere. And it wasn't a great, flashy intern job. It was an intern position that I basically persuaded my boss to keep on longer than I needed to because I needed a job. And I was just so confused and directionless. I didn't know where to go. And the real power of books here, if you look at it from a lens of mentorship, is that these folks have tried, right? And they've succeeded. That's why there's books about them. So their trials, their tribulations are all being accounted for in their biography. And you can learn from that. Even if the story is not your story, you can learn about determination. You can learn about facing failures. Or if you're like, hey, I don't know anyone that owns a business, you can read business books. I want to be financially free. Nobody in my family is financially free. Nobody I know is financially free. I want to be the one to change that. Read a book about financial literacy, right? Read from the perspective of someone who might not have been financially literate and now has. And there's so many different ways to cut this. And I urge you to find something that works for you. I'm not going to give you suggestions because your life is so personal to you. But if you find what works for you, that might be a form of mentorship. And it doesn't substitute human mentorship, but this is a stepping stone, right? If you're like me, I didn't know how to do a coffee chat. I didn't know how to network. I felt a lot of fear going into someone who was in a position that I wanted to be in, or even just, a more senior position than my entry-level position being a new grad. This is something that helped me so much. And I hope that as you're sorting through, what can I change? How do I make my situation different? You look to books as a form of guidance, and it helps you achieve the next set of goals that you have for yourself.